Order the meeting of the North Andover School Committee for April 7th, 2016. I'd like to start by rising in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and if you'd be so kind as to silence your electronic devices to minimize interruption. So to start things off, we do have a full agenda. What I would like to do with the committee's approval is to move things around in respect of our visitors' time, specifically our public safety officers. And if that's okay, I'd like to start with public comment. We have two sessions for public comment, once at the beginning on any topic, and then later at the end of the meeting if anyone has any further comments. So is there any public comment for the committee? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to recognition. Who's going to be providing the recognition overview?
Mr. Young.
Mr. Young, welcome.
Oh, hooray.
Scott Young, assistant principal for athletics and activities at the high school.
You
I'm lucky enough to be here tonight to kind of share a story with you that really started as a small little project. Emma Bilecki, Shannon McElroy, Rebecca Riedel came, and they were going to do this DECA project they described to me last summer. And it really spiraled on them. They organized and implemented the first Relay for Life event here in North Andover. And again, it became kind of like a lifeblood for the girls. They really put everything they had into it. These events are held all over the country. They're overnight walks to raise money for the American Cancer Society. And they're typically organized by 15 to 20 big-time adult community members that form a committee, and it's our movers and shakers in town. And we had 3 high school kids put the whole thing together. They originally said their goal was to raise $20,000, get 100 people to participate. They were able to raise $32,000 and have 200 people participate.
Wow. Yeah, impressive.
One of our business teachers, his wife works for the American Cancer Society, said that she's never seen any group of high school kids do anything like this. I think it's a true testament to all of our kids, but especially these 3. They really did all the work by themselves. They employed a lot of help, but there were no adults pulling the strings behind the scenes. They did everything from start to finish. They secured facilities, they hired police details, they got entertainment, they got food, they did it all. The maturity, the work ethic, the raised values that these guys displayed was really something that made all the high school proud. So tonight we'd like to recognize Emma Bilecki, Shannon McElroy, and Rebecca Riedel.
Yeah. Thank you.
Congratulations. Super job.
Emma?
Emma, yes. Thank you so much. Do you guys want to say anything? I know
Please.
You're not short for words. I've met with you. I know you can.
Well, first off, we did want to thank everyone. We did want to thank everyone, specifically Dr. Price and Dr. Scazzarella and Mr. Young, for enabling us and letting us put up this huge event. And we really appreciate the facility that we got to use and everyone's cooperation that let this be the success that it was. So yeah. Thank you.
And we also had other committee members who weren't fully in the front, but they were still helping us, and they were able to help us with everything, and just the community all together. They came together so much more than we ever could have hoped, so we're really grateful for that.
And we hope to make it an annual event as well, so we're working on that.
That's great.
Thank you.
The results speak for themselves, but the way you did it is really what's special, and thank you very much for doing that for our community.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great guys.
Great job.
Good job.
Excellent. Yes. Yes. Moving on next, we have our student reports. If Matt and Courtney can join us.
Hello. So we just got underway with our third trimester of school. So we're just began the 3rd week. So things are finally settling in. The workload's picking up. So the first couple days getting used to it, getting acclimated to the new schedule, where to go. So now we're really getting to big projects, presentations, assignments. So with the come of the 3rd trimester came the beginning of spring sports. those come off to a rocky start with the weather and the cancellations with the crazy snow and everything. But we're also happy to announce that we just formed the boys volleyball team. They started off with a couple players. They didn't have enough for a full team, but they finally got over the hump, and they are underway with matches and everything now, which is great to see. The Knights robotics team, they're going to Worlds, so that's a huge accomplishment for them. I think they're ranked like 18th in the world right now.
They are.
Some crazy stat like that.
2 teams.
Yeah, it's 2 teams, not just one, 2 of them. So yeah, that's about it for me.
As you guys probably know, the Nas chorus recently won 2 gold medals at Mika, and I would just like to publicly recognize Frank Zhao. He was the pianist, and I think without him, they wouldn't have been able to do as well as they did. He was there, he matched their tempo, he had extra practice to practice with them. I'd also like to point out the environmental club has been working very hard to recycle and keep our school green. That the recycle bin was empty this morning, and we recently filled it with extra bins that haven't been able to be put into the bin. So I'd just like to point that out. And yeah.
Great. Your comment about the chorus, they're going down to
Virginia. Into next week, yeah.
Well, the band is heading down as well, but they got invited to the gold competition, so it's great to see that, and I appreciate the support as well from the student body.
Matt,
Yes.
how's senior slump? Started?
Not yet.
Good answer.
What even is a senior slump?
Better answer.
Very good.
It'll start once the deposit check.
That's already been cleared for me, but
Did you get the sweatshirt yet?
It'll start the day
that has
after
been passed.
graduation.
Well, great. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Great. Again, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing on our agenda topic is the school hearing, a public hearing for school choice. But before we do that, I would like to introduce our newest member to the school committee, Ms. Amy Mabling.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Happy to be here.
It's great to have you.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to working with you as an active and knowledgeable member of the committee. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
That's
Appreciate
right.
it.
What I'd like to do in order to handle the public hearing on school choice is also move up the first reading of the school choice at a new business, so there's context behind the public hearing, if that's reasonable with the committee. So I'm not sure, I was having trouble finding that in, oh, here it is. It's actually item 5 for the hearing procedures, but the first reading of the school choice, maybe Dr. Price, if you could walk us through the reason why we need to do this annually and what the administration's perspective is on this topic.
Yeah, so each year the DEAS requires us to hold a public hearing around whether or not we will participate as a receiving district in the school choice program during the upcoming school year. So we have to determine, do we have the space, will we take students at our per pupil rate, and we have to let them know whether or not we are participants in the school choice. And as you guys know, we are recommending that we do not participate in school choice as a receiving district simply because we just don't have the space. And once we open our doors, then that would become a major issue. I mean, we're bursting at the seams, and especially at our elementary and middle school. And so our recommendation is that we do not participate in school choice.
If we do have school choice, it's all.
Yeah.
We have to take all
So
classes.
that's the challenge for us. So we're recommending that we don't do it. I don't believe we ever have participated in it. We're recommending we continue that.
Great, as part of that preamble. So in accordance with our policy on special procedures for hearings, I'll call for a public hearing on this matter. The process will be, if you wish to provide input into the hearing procedures, please come to the table, introduce yourself by name, provide your input, and we'd like to make sure that citizens have opportunity, or citizens of North Andover have opportunity before other people. And then just finally, the rest of the process is public notice was given in the media.
Yes, it was.
And it's also made available in print information. So with that, I will open the public hearing procedure for school choice participation for North Andover Schools 2016-2017. Would anybody care to provide comment? Okay, seeing none, I will close the hearing, and at our next reading, the committee will vote on the topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, we have our consent agenda. Our consent agenda applies to meeting minutes only. So I'd entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes from March 24 as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second? There's a second. Okay, thank you. Any conversation or discussion on the meeting minutes?
We're good.
Okay. So no further conversation. I'd call for approval of the meeting minutes as presented. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? And any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
One abstention. Thank you. Moving on, we have the chair's report. There are two things that are in the list. I also want to make reference that Mr. Gilligan and I attended the Town Opium Task Force earlier this month. I can't remember what day that was. But that was, again, it was Thursday, thank you. I was in for Mr. Limpert, again, a very interested and focused group trying to solve a very big problem in our community, and Lieutenant Foltz is here as well. We'll hear from him on another topic. Ms. Gilligan, did you want to provide any comment on what you experienced?
I just echo your sentiments. It's really nice to see folks across the community, police, fire, youth center, schools, all working together. As well as private citizens with some areas of expertise, the Board of Health, et cetera. So it's an issue everywhere, and I think that these folks are up for the task.
Absolutely. And I know, Mr. Limpert, that's an activity you are continuing to be involved in. I know that we're in data gathering mode, and I'm looking forward to going from data gathering to recommendations, and I know that some great things will come out of that. So with that, the other point I just wanted to make, Tuesday, the Town All Band Festival was had, another great activity. I think Cam is going to be replaying that. If you haven't had a chance, it is our music program across the middle school, grades 6 through 8, and the high school performing in front of the town. So it's quite an opportunity to see the music programs in action. So that was also a very enjoyable activity, and please, if you have a chance, review it on CAM. The next topic is school start time. Mr. Teresi had requested that we put this on the agenda, so I'll yield the chair to Mr. Teresi for discussion on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I guess, generally speaking, it just seems there's been a lot of articles in the newspapers recently of different schools throughout the Commonwealth. Most recently this past Sunday, I think it was in the Globe North section, talking about the Middlesex League, talking about pushing back start times. And I know this has always been a source of consternation for scheduling purposes, but it seems to me more and more schools across the Commonwealth are considering moving start times back, especially with the high school students. Again, just from what I read, obviously I'm not a doctor, but you know, the evidence shows that a lot of high school students in particular are having a tough time with the earlier start times. So again, I just wanted to put it on the radar screen and maybe talk about it a little bit generally, and thought about maybe putting together a task force like some school districts have as far as examining what it would take cost-wise. Obviously there's obviously costs involved, but scheduling sports, there's a whole range of issues that need to be thought about. But I know some school districts in the Commonwealth have already pushed back start times. I know, like I said, it seems like it's in the paper every week.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to be behind the curve on this. I think that maybe we should be a little proactive and maybe put together a task force, and I'd love to have some feedback. I know I had a very informal conversation with the superintendent a couple weeks ago about it, so just kind of throw it out there.
Just to provide a little more context to that, you know, we had looked at this about 5 years ago, and we had a fairly extensive task force and did that. And at that time, we didn't seem to be able to reach a consensus about making any dramatic changes in the start time. We made a little change, but it wasn't much. It was sort of more, it's sort of more just to say we had done something. But there was a lot of sentiment at that time to make these same changes, and I think we had a good group, so we might go back and review who some of those people might have been and get them to sort of tell us a little bit about what their experience
So
was.
Mr. Gilligan chaired that task force, so I was just going to ask him to share a little bit about that.
I actually chaired two start time task forces. One was probably 2004 or 5, and prior to that, maybe 99. Sue Nicholson, when she was principal of the high school, very early on, looked at this data, and it wasn't really, it's not really new. This evidence has been out there quite some time. So the first task force that looked at it, and the second kind of came with some similar conclusions. Yes, it is better for kids. for high school students. And some of the areas some of the obstacles that we ran into were a couple. We had visited extensively schools that did it, and one of the differences that schools that successfully did it, they either had a lot of money to pay for the additional busing, and or they didn't have many buses at all. So Beverly was one of the first districts that did it. They had about an 8:25 start time for a long time. So the compromise was going from a 7:15 time at North Andover High School. So the first class used to start at 7:15, and now it's 20, 25 minutes later. But the biggest issues were without adding additional buses, because if you stagger the time, one of the things was there's evidence that it's really good for elementary kids to go first, but then they're getting out with any adult siblings or all the kids sometimes after school that take care of them, brothers and sisters. But it was it really, and then the busing came down to it, because you'd have to get more buses in order to get them all in at that time. Otherwise, the middle school and elementary school would start. I think elementary was looking at maybe 9 o'clock elementary start with the pushback.
So as we discussed, we talked about this extensively in Newton. It's one of the places, and I was involved in it. It's a huge undertaking to look at it, and my concern is I'm not sure that this is the first issue on my priority list in terms of the North Andover Public Schools. We don't have a curriculum plan moving forward and there's a lot of other things that I see as first priorities. Not that this isn't important, especially since we've tried to address this in the past. So I'm amenable if the school committee wants to put a task force together. I just want to make sure we don't do so without addressing what I see as more pressing needs within the district.
Yeah, and I think Mr. McDevitt had a...
I think everybody probably received it in the mail. I think I PDF'd it out to you guys as well, but there was a committee that the Massachusetts School Committee Association, there was a meeting, it's actually tonight, started about 10 minutes ago. So we don't, I'm sorry?
At Newton North.
At Newton North, yeah.
Darn, I could have gotten home quicker.
Yeah. So they were actually going to start some of the conversation there, and I did ask on behalf of the committee that they forward any of the information and the notes that are out there. So, I think it'd be interesting to just kind of hear what's going on. I mean, I'm not necessarily sure one town can kind of go it alone.
Correct.
I think, from a lot of scheduling perspectives, you have to look at that. But I'd be curious to know what they find out tonight and where some of that is. And then I'm sure it'll pop up in the Globe in another 2 days, too.
But I do agree with Mr. Teresi. I think we ought to sort of start to take some action just to track this issue so that we're sort of up to speed a little bit if we need to do something about it. But,
right.
Without spending too much, mental energy on this versus some other priorities we have. But I think it's good to, put together maybe a somewhat smaller group, to start to think about it, and some community people that, athletic, boosters, all those people that are the constituents.
The task force that you referenced from 5 or 6 years ago, did they actually put together a report on that, or was it just
What did we do?
There was an extensive report, but that was, it's more than 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, no.
Didn't we recently have a questionnaire that involved the holidays, with the start time holiday?
That was school calendar start date, not the date.
Right, but I think didn't they also talk about start time tutoring? I feel like the
We can
public
find out.
was interviewed about this.
Stan, there might have been a third group, but I don't think I was on the last one.
This was when Mr. Arnold was the superintendent, Mr. Gilligan, Dr. Hutchinson was the sort of head of this. So there was a report. There was a lot of data. I just don't remember.
So let me propose that
We'll get it for you.
Let's get the background. Let's see where the trends are. If you would want to contact other community representatives.
Well, I think representative. With that being said, I would if there was a report done several years ago, I'd like to take a look at that first. But maybe obviously now I've been on the school committee for a little while now, and I'm more attuned to reading the newspaper for certain stories. It just seems like it's in the paper every single week, in Massachusetts specifically.
I think one thing that's come out of the initiative that they're having this meeting about is it looks like a whole athletic conference is trying to do it at the same time. So that would be something we'd have to look at it, and I don't know much about, Mr. Young could help us with that. We'd have to get enough of the group of schools that we compete against in various sports to try to do the same thing, or would it just be crazy?
And at the same time, we did add 15 minutes to the school day while all this took place. High school used to get out at 1:42.
And I do recall that was when we did that 4 or 5 years ago. I remember that was a very difficult and very resource-intensive process. And I tend to agree with Dr. Price that this may not be on the top of our list, but I think
it's important.
Being aware of it, being aware of how it impacts
and tracking, just so we're kind of
yes.
up to speed on what other people are thinking. I think it's a good idea.
So if someone could dive into the vast archives of the school administration.
I am
and dig up
confident
such
that
report,
Ms. Zagari
I
would
would
have this
I would
taken
love to
care of
see
for you.
the task force
Wonder
report.
Woman.
As she is watching us at home, I'm sure she is looking for it as we speak.
In the drive.
Guessing it's already come
somewhere
through.
in the drive.
Very good.
It might be in your email before the meeting is over. No pressure.
Cue the music.
Cue the music.
Cue the music.
Did it just come through?
That's fine.
Thank you for your help.
Let's start that and keep it on the radar screen though, please.
Fair enough.
I think that's good.
The last item on the chair report is a topic called proposed meal tax repeal impact. And I think for those who are watching the Board of Selectmen meeting in the review of the warrant, there was a warrant article that has been proposed to repeal the town of North Andover meals tax. And I thought it would be important for the school community to understand, number one, that is something that's happening at town meeting. It was a very narrow victory that the meals tax was brought forth the second time it was in town meeting. And I just wanted to take an opportunity with Dr. Price's indulgence to understand what the impact, if the $500,000 of revenue to the town is no longer available, and with the assumptions that the split of the revenue is the same as it traditionally has been, what would the impact to this year's budget be if the meals tax were repealed?
Yeah, so I've talked with Mr. McDevitt, the other Andrew, Mr. Naylor, about this. And, the reality is most income that comes into the town is split in a way 68-32. That's the traditional split. So if we had to cut $500,000, it would probably be a cut 68-32 or something like that. The math actually is all the money we had left over after level services. So everything I've proposed in this budget, from the library media specialists to the different reorganizations, to the human resources director, to the contingency funds, to the 2 elementary school positions that we're putting on hold, everything, it's basically that would be the impact. So it's a significant impact. Some have argued that you could, in the short term, potentially fund a 1 year through some free cash, but then that impacts us long term. So it may seem simple in that regard to kind of, we can bridge a year, but you bridge a year and then you're still back to a reduced budget to start with. So for those of you who are watching or those of you in the audience, this would be a significant impact on the North Andover Public Schools in terms of so much of what we felt good about during our budget season was that we were moving forward in a thoughtful way. Middle school world language, all of those things, we would be looking at about a $330,000, $340,000 component of the $500,000. We had proposed $317,000 of additional stuff above level services. So the simple math is that goes.
At that, and then some.
Can I just, I think that I'm correct in this, but, and you may not know, but it is half of 1%.
Correct. That
is added on to that. So that's what I thought it was. So I just did the fast math. I mean, on a $75 bill, it's 40 cents.
Yeah.
And I understand the analysis is that as they look at it, it has not impacted the number of restaurants and the success of restaurants here in North Andover.
Yeah, they're coming. High quality establishments are here.
Well, people aren't deciding not to go to these places because of this.
Yeah.
People I've talked with.
I don't think people know that they're paying.
That's right.
Maybe you could translate that for Mr. Limpert at the airport, where it would take, is it 10 cents more than
3.
3
cents a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
You get 3 less chocolate chips.
That's right.
So thank you for bringing that forward. I think that it's an important thing for the school community to be aware of.
The only other thing I would add to Dr. Price's comments is that would also have a $160,000 impact on the municipal side.
Correct.
So it would impact the senior center or the youth center or the library or public safety or something. That money would have to come from somewhere on the municipal side too. So it's a town impact if we don't have that meals tax.
And the one thing that a meals tax does do, as we're thinking about revenue sources, is a lot of people who don't live in this town pay that revenue source.
Exactly.
I pay that revenue source when I go out to dinner and lunch in the town, and lots of people from other towns.
And we appreciate your contribution.
But it's just something to think about, that it is one of the revenue sources that is paid by people who don't live in North Andover exclusively.
And we should constantly reiterate, it is not a tax on restaurants.
Right.
It is a tax on restaurant patrons.
Correct.
That just is passed through the restaurants, like sales tax. It's just like sales tax.
And surprisingly, at the Board of Selectmen meeting, it was not a motion that they voted on. Well, not voted. They didn't have a support or lack of support for. So again, to the school community, I would encourage you to reach out to your Board of Selectmen, voice your concerns, make sure they're aware of your concerns. It is real, and it could detriment our
Although
process.
I would add that at that meeting, several of the selectmen who were very clear that they had originally opposed this tax now were in favor of it. So they would be in favor of retaining the meals tax. So fair to be clear about that.
Very good. Thank you. That's it for the chair report. Can we?
Yeah, I'm going to move through the superintendent's report. First, I want to look at the calendar and just walk you through it. So you all had asked for the early releases. I think you've set the calendar, so we don't need a formal vote, but I just wanted to get your input on it, and then we will put it up there. We've put the half-days on. You'll see that in general they follow the pattern of a Wednesdays, every other Wednesday. We've done something a little crazy in November, and I just wanted to talk you through that. Because we have a number of interesting days in November. So the 8th is Election Day. As you know, we have closing schools, and we are going to be doing conferences at the middle and the elementary school that day.
Teacher conference,
parent-teacher conferences. On Friday the 11th, that's Veterans Day. We made a decision not to do any early releases on November, because if you put them in there, it just became a very choppy month. Instead, what we're going to be doing is having the kids go to a full day and do 2 one-hour PDs for teachers after school. So we're going to still maintain part of the teacher time, which we don't want to lose that collaboration time. So that was kind of the big decision that we made. We just felt if we put those in there, November became a very choppy month. And, November's the time where you're really trying to get it rolling with kids. And if we're doing lots of half days, early releases, it felt like it was problematic. Other than that, it's pretty much as you would normally see. Some months we had to move it from the 1st to the 3rd, the 2nd to the 4th, just based on vacations and other kind of holidays. But this falls within the contractual times. The union has approved our approach here, and hopefully this makes sense.
Okay.
Any thoughts? Okay.
Can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
So on these early release days, I know that the teachers meet within the schools
Yes.
by grade level. Are there any days picked in advance where they can meet across the district?
Yeah, so we, Mr. Gilligan?
Yeah, so in fact, there's 10 days this year out of the 21 that they meet across the district. And prior to being elected, we actually did an entire district day together where we ran an ed camp. It has been one of the largest ed camps run by the MTA. Professional development team really helped us with it. So.
And the January 13th date, which is a full day, I believe, Ms. Gilligan, correct?
Yes.
That would be a day that we would potentially do an all-district full day.
like another ed camp or something.
Yes. So, yeah, and so there will be time within both. Before I move on to the next thing, I just wanted to let you guys know we're doing something really exciting at the middle school. Christy Hale is actually very involved in it. Don't know if you've heard, but Andover Public Schools has been doing something where they're taking food that is not used at lunch and actually gathering that food from kids, whether it be food that they're getting through the school lunch program, the milk they're not drinking, the string cheese they're not using, and rather than it going into the bin, they're actually collecting that food and then giving it to families in need within surrounding towns and Andover, and then also to different charities. And so this became something that the PTO co-presidents were very interested in, especially since it's right in Andover and it was local. So right after break, we're going to be piloting this at the North Andover Middle School for 2 weeks, where we're going to have a whole bunch of volunteers. We're working very closely with Erica Murphy, our food service person, who, by the way, is just great.
Yeah.
And she has got a refrigerator she's going to be able to use in the cafeteria to store the information. Cheryl Barzak has been working on this, and we are going to be collecting unused food, and then we are going to be distributing it to 3 places. The first priority is actually to distribute to our school nurses. So, Cheryl, if you just want to talk quickly about why that would be useful.
So one thing in the report there I collect every year that I present to you guys, so you don't go over there.
Yeah, so, if you please, I'm sorry.
All the way.
So the folks at home.
And you can stay up here because we're going to call you right back in a minute.
So I collect that information, or the nurses collect it, and so we know how many times students come down for a snack. Middle school and high school, we don't collect as much because we just leave out crackers if anybody needs it. But in elementary, we collected this year, and just from the beginning of the school year, there have been over 2,000 students that have come to the elementary schools looking for a snack, so they don't have it, or so it's great. I love this program because it's too many students to be coming to the nurse for. It makes the offices too crowded, and there's other things that the nurses have to do, and it's just. I just am really looking forward to it. So we're starting, the first school will be Atkinson, and then Thompson, and then Kittredge, and we're kind of going in priority by how, where the needs are.
Excellent.
So this is packaged food that we're
Yes, so there's
Yes.
rules about what we obviously can't use partially used food, and there's all these kind of.
After a milk carton.
Right,
You can't-
exactly.
right, so peanut-free products and healthy products too. So the chips we don't want. We're going to just take the carrots, the fruit, the cheese sticks, applesauce, raisins.
Stuff from home as well as from
Yes.
within. That's great.
Both, if they're not open,
Open,
they can be, and then if the nurses, in the first round of the nurses, then we're actually working with some principals to identify some families in North Andover who could benefit from having some food. And then we have reached out to a number of local charities that accept food. So the idea here is with an awesome parent volunteer group and some kids and some student leaders, we're just going to pilot it at the middle school to see if it works. And if it works, there's a lot of interest to kind of actually have this roll out to other
It's a
schools.
sustainable community.
Yeah.
Very
We
nice.
may even like each school. I was talking with the Atkinson principal that maybe we could just have that school collect enough to provide for their own schools, which would be great.
But the middle school seemed to make the most sense because we had a committed parent volunteer. We had the space in the cafeteria to have a refrigerator. So we're just going to try it, see how it works. And we're really excited. Anything to add, Christy?
No, we're very excited.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Great.
This is now being done in Andover.
It's being done in Andover.
Very excited.
And it's being done, I think the one difference between North Andover and Andover is it's being done in Andover by a committed group of parents. And what we've done is got a committed group of parents working closely with school officials. So for instance, the fact that the nurses are involved, the fact that the food service director is involved, the fact that we're all involved, the
And the youth
principal.
center, we might bring some of the food there and have people pick it up there. So we're all talking about different
Yeah, so
opportunities.
it's more of it's a bit more of a community.
Yeah.
Great. Super.
And then just an update on the parent-teacher conferences. So as I sort of previewed, we are going to be doing middle school parent-teacher conferences on Election Day. And exactly how that's going to look, we have not quite figured. Joan and I were actually due to meet on Monday, but with the snow, my calendar got crazy. Snow in April. Let's just stop there.
Yeah,
But,
stop.
but we're really going to come up with a plan. I just want to make it really clear to anybody who's listening, there is absolutely no way we can have all middle school parents in. It just is not doable given the size of the teams. So we're going to have to work on prioritizing how we do that. And so I will be bringing kind of up our plan back. But I just want to, we do believe it's important to have middle school conferences. And we understand that there's no way the teachers can meet with the 100 parents that they have. So how we're going to do that is going to be a little tricky in how many slots we have. But our hope is on that election day is to have an opportunity for parents to be able to meet with teachers. And we'll get back to you on that. But our commitment is to do something.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'd like to take the next item out of order. I'd like to jump down to 10B and have a discussion about K-12 adoption of Alice. If Lieutenant Detective Folds and Officer Carafee can join us, just feel free to grab one more chair. Dr. Price, you want to give us a setup for this?
Yeah, so as I hope you know, we have been doing an enhanced lockdown procedure at the high school for a number of years. Much of it being the Alice framework. Thank you. We're singing. And this fall, EJ came to me and along with Dr. Scazzarella and Cheryl and said, I really think we should think about an enhanced lockdown K to 12. And a number of communities have moved in this direction. So really, I just wanted to give everyone an overview of what it was and our thinking about if we moved in this direction, what would be the process? Because clearly, we're not going to make the decision to do this and then just have it be done. This is part of informing the community and helping people understand what does enhanced lockdown do, what is ALICE, what does it look like in a first grade classroom compared to a high school classroom. I trust very much the North Andover Police Department, and when they're coming to me saying, Jen, this is what we should do to keep our kids safe, I trust that they have the best interest of our kids and know a heck of a lot better than I do what makes the most sense. So that's really how we set it
And
up.
thank you very much for coming this evening to enlighten and educate us.
Thank you. So a little background. This is not the most popular subject to talk about, but it's one we need to discuss. I don't know if you know, this month will be 17 years from Columbine. So things have changed. Columbine changed police response to, lack of a better term, active shooter situations in schools. Unfortunately, the school's response wasn't quite as quick. That pretty much took Sandy Hook. But ALICE, if you look on the screen, this is a breakdown. It's an acronym. This is not a step-by-step process. It's an options process. The alert, that's the first one. That's to get the information out to the school community as quickly as possible and to the police. Basically, if you have something happen in your school, you want the people in the school to know about it as soon as possible. Plain, simple language, direct, as much information as they can put out there. The lockdown, it's an enhanced lockdown, barricaded classrooms. Right now, we do have lockdown as part of the accepted procedure in the schools, with the exception of the high school. That's simply lock the door, shut the lights off, hide in the room. This adds a barricading component. This will buy time. History has shown that an active shooter basically wants to inflict as much damage as quickly as possible. If he encounters a door that's locked and barricaded, that those extra seconds may make a move on. The Inform, this is using technology, including cell phones, to contact the police, contact the office, keep the information as real time as possible. Everyone likes to think that the police are going to be there, in 30 seconds. In reality, that doesn't happen. Phone calls have to be made. Dispatches, dispatch cruisers. We're trying to get information. As we're responding to the call, any additional information we get helps the response. C is the most controversial part of the whole ALICE program. This is the counter. Countering has been shown to interrupt the skill set of the shooter. Basically, throws off whatever he's trying to do, throws distractions at him, buys time. In some cases, the older kids, they may be able to overpower him. Teachers may be able to overpower him. This is the last resort, absolute last resort, but it's something you need to know. Preferred response, evacuate. Whenever possible, best course of action. We all tell with our kids, they get near something dangerous, get away from it. It's the same thing here. Evacuate is the preferred response, if you can safely do so. A couple of case studies were done. U.S. Department of Education, along with Department of Homeland Security, did a study. Back in 2007, they actually used to recommend the lockdown. In 2013, they expanded the active shooter guidance to include run, hide, or fight options. And if you look at ALICE, it gives you those three options. Not worded that way, but they're there. The IACP, International Association of Chiefs of Police, they actually used to recommend lockdown. They have since changed in their most recent edition to include evacuation, active resistance. It also addresses the possible absence of adult direction during a situation, which is it could be a reality. And finally, Massachusetts Governor's Task Force in 2014, Governor Patrick signed an executive order establishing a task force on school safety. That task force report actually specifically mentions ALICE training as a response to the event of a violent threat. Columbine. The big question from Columbine, and again, this is probably the major event that brought attention to school shootings in the United States. Everyone asks, well, we do now, why did 54 students stay for 5 minutes in the library? The total event was 8.5 minutes long, and it started outside Columbine High School. The shooters, I'm not going to use their names, went into the high school. They shot outside, they went in, they went to the cafeteria. During this entire time, the students in the library were hiding under desks, hiding behind bookcases. The two shooters entered the library, they were still hiding, and they ended up inflicting the most damage in the library. It wasn't until they were actually in the library and shooting that the students finally ran out an easily accessible evacuation route. They could have done it as soon as they entered the school, as soon as they heard the shots outside. But that's not how they were trained. The staff wasn't trained that way, the students weren't trained that way. They were trained the old Cold War, hide under the desks. One of the worst ones, it happened at college, but a lot to be said for this. Virginia Tech. This was where the shooter came in. You'll see a hallway where one person was killed. The first two classrooms, and again, that played a part in it. The first two classrooms he encountered, you see it says stayed down. Those were the highest number of casualties. They simply stayed there, got down, hid. As he moved up, there was one room. He entered, left, they barricaded again, barricaded after that, and he couldn't get in. That had reduced casualties. Jumped and barricaded. They actually barricaded the door and were jumping out the window. They had two casualties. One of those was a professor that was actually holding the door closed with his body. In the last room, they barricaded, locked down, and there were 0 casualties in that classroom. So passive, proactive responses, 28 killed in the passive responses. Those just stayed down, and only 2 proactive. And again, one of them was that professor who basically gave his life for his students. The high school put together a video on this. Dr. Scazzarella and Lieutenant Gray, who was in charge of the school safety prior to me. Back in 2013, Dr. Scazzarella had gone through ALICE instructor training, along with Detective Gallagher, and they had started the program in the high school, and it didn't. They're practicing it, but you'll see in the video they did a great job with this, and we'll discuss a little bit afterwards.
In an attempt to prepare our schools for the unlikely event of a school shooting, we have created this video in partnership with the North Andover Police Department to help ensure safety and possibly save lives. In this video, we explain ALICE, the program adopted by the NAPD to help train students and staff to react to an event. The acronym ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. These are not sequential steps, but options available to promote safety. By learning these techniques, anyone involved in a shooting will be able to choose the most appropriate course of action in any given moment. In the event of a shooting, teachers will need to make a decision quickly, and students will need to work with their teacher to do as asked as efficiently as possible. ALICE will provide students and teachers with the skills they need to assess the situation, take action, and, as events unfold, to reevaluate. The keys are being prepared and working together to keep yourself and others around you safe. It's also worth considering that the techniques described in this video can also be used in the unfortunate event that you encounter a shooting in a public place other than a school. The A in ALICE stands for alert. The first step in helping the school to take action is to provide them with information. If you see a shooter or a suspicious person entering your school, share that information with someone in the office as quickly as possible. It will be important to tell them as much as possible about the appearance of the intruder and his location. This will allow someone with access to the intercom to get the message out to everyone else. From there, people around the school will be able to consider the information about the attacker and choose the course of action that will most ensure their safety. The L in ALICE stands for lockdown. A lockdown is used when a class cannot guarantee their ability to leave the school safely. In a lockdown, the class must lock, then barricade the door in order to prevent an intruder from entering and causing harm. Use large, heavy objects and be sure to block the windows in the door completely. The lights should also be turned off so that it seems as if there are no students in the room. If your door opens out, use a belt around the hinged arm to prevent it from opening. After the door has been barricaded, students should move to the portion of the room farthest away from the windows and out of sight. Most school shooters are looking to inflict as much damage as possible in a short time. If a classroom is blocked, they will most likely move to another location. If an attacker is intent on entering your room, a lockdown will keep you as safe as possible while buying time for other actions, like escaping through the windows. If you should find yourself in a hallway during an event and feel you can't evacuate, try to get into a classroom or a bathroom that can be locked from the inside. Just know that once a teacher has locked down a room, they will not be able to open it back up to let you in. The I in ALICE stands for inform. Once you have ensured your own safety, use the opportunity to call 911 and inform the police about what is happening. Do not worry about overloading the department with calls. Any calls that can't be answered at the North Andover Police Department will be rerouted to an appropriate spot. While on the phone with authorities, inform them of everything you can about the situation. The most important piece of information is your precise location within the building and the location of the aggressor, if you know it. Speak slowly and carefully.
Hello, 911. I'm calling from 430 Osgood Street. It's the North Andover High School. There's a shooter in the school. I'm in room 2012. There's about 10 or 15 of us. The shooter was last seen near the library. Please get here soon. We're all really scared.
Then, patiently wait for the police to arrive. When they have secured the situation, you can evacuate. But first, announce that you are coming out, and then calmly exit the building with your hands in the air so the police know that you are not an aggressor. The C in ALICE stands for counter. If you cannot barricade the door, or if it is going to be impossible to escape, then defending yourself against the shooter is the last resort. Only engage the shooter if there are no other options. Use any books or other heavy objects on hand to throw at the shooter. This distracts the shooter, allowing you more time to disable them or to escape the room. If you disable the shooter, pin him down to the floor and carefully slide the weapon away. Do not pick up or handle the firearm. Take a trash barrel or any other boxes and cover the weapon with it. This helps protect you because it will ensure that the police did not mistake you for the shooter. Call the police to tell them that the shooter is secured in your classroom. The E in ALICE stands for evacuate. If the shooter is in a different part of the school, the best course of action may be to evacuate. Only evacuate if you feel it is safe to do so. Before you leave, announce that you are coming out. As you exit your room and the building, keep your arms in the air so that the police don't mistake you for the shooter. Your school may have a designated rallying point. If possible, proceed directly to that point. While evacuating, you must remember the police are trained to act quickly to subdue the shooter before helping anyone who might be hurt. Under no circumstances should you use cars to leave the school grounds. This will create a traffic jam that can delay the emergency response. Remember, Alice is not a step-by-step plan, but rather a series of options. It will be up to you to evaluate the situation and determine which option or options will serve you best. In the unfortunate event of a shooter entering your school, use the best information that you have available and decide how best to keep yourself safe. It is important to consistently re-evaluate the situation to determine if new action is needed. Using the ALICE strategies, you can improve your chances of safely dealing with a difficult situation.
They did a great job with that. So back in December, myself, 5 other North Andover police officers who are also school resource officers, and Cheryl Barzak attended Alice instructor training. She's a trainer. I know you all know Cheryl. Do you guys all know school resource officer Kara Caffrey? She's the SRO for the middle school and elementary schools. This is the lockdowns and that have been a passion of hers all year. So we actually went through scenarios to get us to feel what it's like to lock down, to counter, to evacuate, and it was incredible. That's when you really understand it. So we went to Dr. Price, we met Mr. Gilligan, and we think this was the direction to go. We presented our case, got their blessing, and we have a plan for implementation. This is step number 2, informing you people what's going to be happening. The next is a parent notification. Probably we'll end up meeting with PTO, if the presidents at least, maybe individual PTOs, probably some sort of written notification going home to the parents before the end of the school year, letting them know this is what's going to start happening next year. Staff orientation in August. We'd like to do that, give an overview, and actually run the staff through scenarios. We can get cooperation from other ALICE instructors from other communities, as well as members of the STARS, the School Threat Assessment Response Team. They will come up and help. Andover actually just implemented it district-wide. We have the bonus of having the high school pretty much already there. Andover didn't. They had to put it through the entire district. They have a very good plan in place. I've talked to their head of detectives over there, Sergeant Higginbottom, and it took him about 2 years to do the entire program. We've already got the high school on board, so we're hoping to do it a little bit quicker, but it may take longer depending on how everything flows. And the last step will be the students with cooperation of the staff running drills. Officer Caffrey's has run numerous lockdown drills based on the current policy throughout the year, and I don't think they've ever seen this many lockdown drills. But we like to think of it, the fire department's required to do 4 a year at each school, and there hasn't been a casualty from a fire in a school in over 50 years. So we think it's well worth it.
Just in terms of the parent multiple notifications, it wouldn't just be writing. We would meet with PTO co-presidents, but we had talked about parent information nights, especially at the elementary level. We're concerned that the counter component especially will be concerning. And, you know, one size does not fit all. What happens in a kindergarten classroom is very different than what happens in a senior in the high school library, and so it would be an opportunity for parents with any concerns to come. We would be present. I would be present. Cheryl would be present. The police would be present, but it just wouldn't be in writing. We'd give an opportunity, and we actually talked about not just doing it in the spring, because in the spring, we're going to do this next year. We'd probably do something right in the fall too, because once it's actually in place, parents may have. So we're thinking about probably 2 parent nights where we would be available to answer questions.
During training, they went into a lot of detail about elementary school, and they have special books for children, and it's mostly teacher-driven in the elementary school, and the teacher kind of makes the decisions, not the younger grades.
Just a question, Lieutenant Foles. I believe it's true that you can provide some video surveillance at headquarters for at least the high school. Is that true?
The high school, yes. They've put all new cameras in there and actually synced it with the police department. We don't monitor it, but should an event take place, it's simply log in and we have access to the high school cameras. That's huge. It wasn't cheap, I don't believe, was it, Jim?
It actually wasn't bad. The
No?
technology for cameras.
Can we do it with all the schools?
Reasonably.
Middle school's up next?
Depends on the meal tax.
Hold off.
Bump it up.
No, it's phenomenal. I mean, they already had the cameras in place. They just upgraded the cameras and linked them, so it's all web-based. We haven't had to use it yet, which that's what we like.
And I also assume that this would be now an annual training cycle that our schools would continuously go through every year, just like fire drills, right? Would do this every year, would have lockdowns and
The drills would continue annually, and the benefit to this is, again, the high school is pretty much doing it, and this would make it district-wide, so the kids that go from the middle school to the high school, the freshmen, aren't relearning something new.
Right.
It's basically muscle memory. And if we start them even earlier, then the kids going from the elementary school into the middle school, same thing. Ease the transition. Just keeps everything the same. And I think, again, we think it's the best course of action, best practice.
What has been the response for this program being implemented at elementary schools? I can see that being kind of more concerning than middle or high school. How's that? How are people accepting it?
It's very, very different at the elementary school level. The elementary school parents, the counter portion actually freaks them out. And I had kids that age that would have freaked me out too. It's not a major component of the program at the elementary school. It's an option. If worse comes to worse, it's an option, but the teachers are making the decisions at that age. They don't expect a 6 or 7-year-old to make the decision on their own whether they're going to evacuate, lock down, start throwing blocks and balls at people. And at that age, they listen to their teachers, where you have your juniors and seniors.
Ages.
Especially them, right?
I think at the elementary level too, during the training they emphasize that now you have the choice. The teachers have the choice. So if you're outside at recess, you don't have to come in the way the old policy is. You can make the decision to stay outside, and you can make the decision if you're at the other end of the school to go ahead and leave. So it's mostly focusing on the evacuation.
I think the conversations that I've had too have just it's an open forum for parents and teachers teachers have been really concerned about this also, but it's been an open conversation, and I think just the options and starting to give them permission to choose those options has been really empowering for them. And I've had positive responses from a lot of teachers.
Question about how do the teachers embrace that they have to now make a decision on behalf of their students.
Yeah, I think that was a huge thing that I at least got from the ALICE training when we went, is to let those teachers know that they have the permission to make that call, that they have permission, and we constantly using that term, permission. You should call 911 and let us know what's going on. Don't wait for the office to do it. You have that permission to leave the building if that's what you think is the right thing to do. But if you don't think it's the right thing to do, no one's going to fault you for that. We're not going to put ourselves in your shoes. But you can make that choice, and they really like that from the conversations I had with them.
So can I make a couple of these? So, first, I think this is great, and thank you for bringing it and the support and the training that I know you're doing, not just, this year, but, continuing on. It's always been something that I think has been a little struggling because we hear about the high school, and, I think this was a year or 2 years ago, like, they could run, right? But the elementary kids, like, were locked down and they were just hunkered, and, my wife was like, "What? Our kids matter too," So, but, all joking aside, I mean, I really like the fact, and I like the word that you used just in terms of permission, and just based upon the information that you have, the teachers and the staff being able to make that judgment call in the moment and not worry about what's happening. The only thing that I kind of am just a little curious about, right now we do fire drills, and they're so natural to the kids. They don't even come home and tell me that we had a fire drill today. Like, it may be like 3 days later, they're like, "Oh yeah, by the way, we had a fire drill and I fell." Whatever it is, it's out there. I would just be curious what we would do in terms of letting parents know 2 days before, just want to let you know, and part of that communication, because I can see, especially for younger children, that being a very concerning,
the high school,
scary.
Dr. Scazzarella does send a message home to parents when they do the lockdowns at the high school right now.
Even
same with elementary
a day or
schools.
two beforehand, or just like
The day
of, she told me. I just met with her this morning.
I do think that, that's a good point. I mean, I think before we did the first one in an elementary school, we could say, hey, just so you know, in 2 days, parents, we're going to do this. I think one of the things that we know is we don't always want to give everyone notice that we're going to do it, because you want to have an authentic response. But in the beginning, like I would imagine that in the beginning we would say we're going to do a lockdown at the Franklin Elementary School on Tuesday, and then what we would do is probably in the spring do one without notice and then let parents know before the kids got home. But I think we would need to be very sensitive to kind of the beginning of this. But at the same time, I don't think we always want to, just so that we can have the authentic response that is important, that we always do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as a parent, I mean, if I get home and I didn't necessarily have picked up that phone message or something, and off the kids came from a bus and said, "By the way, we had a lockdown today," I'd say, "Well, I didn't see Channel 7 flying over."
We have been doing it for quite some time.
I say that I hear about it from my kids all the time.
Yeah, this is just a very different.
Yeah, we would be very sensitive.
We'd be very sensitive to it, and I think that the controversy, particularly around elementary, was years back. I think Sandy Hook in 2012 was a game changer, and people started to really think about elementary schools. And a lot of the communities, particularly Wilmington and a few of the others who were really early adopters, they struggled a little bit with that message early on, but once Sandy Hook hit.
Right. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, when you compared it to the fire drills, that's how we've actually phrased it to kids even at 8th grade down to kindergarten, is you guys are so good at fire drills because you've been doing them for so long, but now this is a different type of safety drill that we want you guys to get really good at. And you can actually see the anxiety has eased from September to now, that they're getting good at them. And they are really, they're taking them seriously, and they're not scared to do them right now.
And it probably helps the teachers too, which when they see their students,
It does. They challenge themselves. I mean, when we did the beginning of the year, we identified some problems at each school, and we sat down with the staff and talked about the problems. And some changes were made, and then the next one went a little bit better at all the schools. Addressed some of the problems. They keep getting better. It's like they're challenging themselves to do better on it. I know it's a little competition, but and hopefully it becomes like the fire drills. You don't hear about them.
Right.
The 3 days.
After Columbine, there was a bunch of money that became available, and everybody sort of did a building audit and identified everything, and doors have numbers and all of that. Is that online for you all? Do you have that?
Actually, we have that's online, but I actually brought back the numbers on the doors and stuff. That was that was right after Columbine.
Yeah. Because we had all those bound volumes that had all the data about the schools.
That's available to all the officers. They actually can access them in their cruisers now as they're responding.
That's great. So if somebody says, "I'm in this room" or that door or something,
yes,
that's great.
We've also invited, like when we do a lockdown, because myself and the other school resource officer will invite patrol officers that are on the road just to walk through with us so that they know the layouts of each of the buildings, so that patrol officers are familiar with them.
And I commend Lieutenant Folds having the officers train in the summertime without them being notified, to do an active shooter drill at all the schools. They just completely started doing that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that was Lieutenant Gray. I'll take the commendation. Lieutenant Gray will organize that one.
But they worked with us, and they went in during the summertime, so that everyone became familiar with each school, because each school's a little unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, just I want to pass on my thanks to you, Cheryl, and EJ, Officer Caffrey, as well, for a very sobering presentation. I mean, I have very young kids who are going to start the school system next year, and I'm just wondering, who sees that video? I mean, that video is very, like I said, sobering, it's disturbing. I mean, I think my 5-year-old would freak out.
That's not going to be
so. I'm just curious. Well, no, but I mean, I think for middle school and high school students, it's age appropriate, and it's important to know. I mean, this is unfortunately the reality we live in today, and that's another whole conversation altogether. But I found it very effective. It definitely got through to me what it took, and the whole multiple option thing. You know, it's not a step-by-step process. It's reactionary, I guess I would say. But what do you do for the kindergartners?
There's children's books out there that explain it, very well written. Honestly,
I mean, how do you? I mean, you're in the schools.
Yeah. To be totally honest, when they're that little,
teachers,
they listen. I know they always do, but they really do listen to what the teacher said. This is personal to me too. I have a lot of nieces and nephews that are in the school system. So when I do the lockdowns in their schools, I want to make sure they're safe. But they do listen to what their teachers say. Their teachers tell them to get in the corner, they're going to. The teacher says, we're going to go outside now, they're gonna. And it's a lot different of an explanation than we can be very plain language with the older kids.
Right.
With the younger kids, you're not necessarily.
Very well done.
Yeah.
And there's also different reasons that the principals sometimes talk with the kids. That could be bad weather outside. It could be, I've heard them talk about wild animals and the coyotes at Sargent and the skunks at Kittredge.
Fox at Sargent. When I go to school, sometimes they'll be like, Officer Caffrey, what animal was it this time? And you're like, it was a skunk, no spraying. Like,
but the teachers are great with them.
Great.
It's good to hear.
Anything else? Excellent. Thank you. Again, I just want to pass along my thanks to you and the police department and the coordination that we've had. We've had a couple of incidents with active scenes adjacent to the schools. Every single moment of those events, the administration we kept in direct contact. Good decisions appear to have been made, and do we lock or do we not lock? So I just want to make sure that that's also visible, that even without an active shooter in a school, there is an excellent collaborative relationship and excellent response between the administrations of the schools and the police departments. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for Thank you guys. Mr. Rose, I was wondering if we could do the FIT money presentation prior to the 5-year, just because it's part of the 5-year curriculum.
That makes perfect sense. So we're going to jump a little bit back to old business then. And we're going to cover the 5-year curriculum and FIT.
Yep.
Okay.
FIT first?
FIT.
FIT
Let's get
first.
FIT.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you. Carol Arkham, our STEM coordinator, is here with us tonight. And Jim, if you can go to the next slide, we'll get started right away. So the FIT money, the financial literacy program. One thing I wanted to do is just before we start, I had the opportunity the other night. I just noticed this last night. The Wall Street Journal did a survey across the world. And one of the things, the conclusions that they came to, yeah, they're just for you guys. It's not linked. One of the conclusions that they came to on the front page is the survey. On the second is a HuffPost business article. Is that America isn't teaching kids how to manage money, and it's a problem. And they go into a whole bunch of reasons why. But they had the United States is the world's richest nation, but we ranked 14th in financial literacy. So it's just timely. I saw that last night. I thought it was an interesting piece to this. But basically, if with the funding for FIT money, it would allow us to get a group of teachers together to develop this financial literacy curriculum. It's with an interdisciplinary approach linking math and social studies and financial support for the work from an outside resource. So it's an opportunity for our teachers to not only make some money, but also to develop the curriculum that they'll be using in class and then sharing and modeling with their peers. If you go on to the next slide, one of the things I just wanted to tie in is the math curriculum. So I said, okay, let's take a look at, we were talking about fourth grade is being one of the first years. So he took a look at the fourth grade, some of the, the standards in the Massachusetts state frameworks, using the 4 operations with whole numbers to solve problems, generalized place value understanding for multi-digit whole numbers, use place value understanding and properties of operations to perform multi-digit arithmetic, understand decimals, notation for fractions, etc. And then what's really interesting is this has the ability to also bring in other subject areas across the curriculum. Jim, if you could slide that up to social studies.
Can I?
If you can't, that's okay.
We have it.
It's on the deck.
You have
The
it.
last slide on the presentation.
So really a big component of the fourth grade social studies, there's a significant section on economics, giving examples of the interaction of buyers and sellers that influence the prices and goods and service and markets. Examples way people save their money and explain the advantages and disadvantages of each. Define what an entrepreneur is, and you guys can read it on. But it's a way not only to just bring this into mathematics, but also to bring in things like social studies, and there'll be other pieces across, because one of the things that we see is, at least I see it with my own children in 6th and 2nd grade, is they think everything's a swipe, or a tap with a thing, or a pay with my phone. And money does not grow on trees, as my dad used to say to me.
You're really getting old now.
Yeah. But it's an interesting phenomenon, and with the amount of college debt, what college is today, this would be really something good to start young. And then there's opportunities, as we mentioned before, for not only a parental component at some point and some education for people that may struggle, but also be able to move to the different levels. Dr. Price had a very successful financial literacy component at Newton North High School, and I think it would be valuable, but it would be great to start young with these folks. One of the next components, and I'm going to turn this over to Kara, is digital learning through Everfi. And Kara, if you want to go.
Thank you. So in trying to figure out how would we approach this, and again, having some outside money is fantastic, so we don't need to dip into the wealth of money we're excited to have for curriculum in the coming years, but looking at some good options that might be a base for teachers to kind of incorporate in instead of starting from scratch. And one of the companies that came across our radar was a company called Everfi, and what I love about their products is that it's all free, which is fantastic. And not only, free is good, but as an educator, you find a lot of free things, and they're what you pay for. They're not always excellent. You need to kind of really sort through and sift through what's available. They often have huge ads, and especially on digital things, different areas that kids could click on by accident and head them in the wrong path. So what I love about Everfi is they provide everything free, and they get their sponsorship through corporations. And those corporations have a tiny little, maybe their name at the bottom, so it's not that kind of maybe obnoxious or in the way, taking away from what the content that we're hoping the students will get out of it. So it's a kind of nice business model. They only have a few modules right now, and one of their areas of focus is on financial literacy. The other is STEM, which is partially why it came across my plate as well. They have some really neat, for middle school and high school, some STEM modules. So the one that we're looking at in particular is called Vault, and all of their modules are very story-based, they're very game, it's that engaging that our students are kind of familiar with, plays a lot like a video game. It's embedding all of those ideas in a very friendly and very age-appropriate manner. And then the other piece is that they have staff to come out. So we've actually had one of their representatives come out and launch some of their programs at our middle school. Actually, Karina Lynn, our reading teacher, believe it or not, is using it to teach some of the students those basics so they have some good real-life experiences to draw upon in her classes, and then is also kind of supplementing with the STEM curriculum in 7th grade as well. So she had the person come out and launched in her classroom. The kids were on in about 2 seconds, and again, with the Chromebooks, it's a great opportunity now that we have more technology in the classroom, a good use of that, and they're kind of off and running. So they have a staff to come out and help with us, so it's taking a little bit of that time away from our tech folks who can't always be there to kind of hold hands and get teachers off the ground running. So they have a really great program there. Flip to the next. So Vault, yep.
What age range is that?
Good question. That's the next bullet. So the Vault is their earliest program right now, and it's for grades 4 through 6. And we've had the opportunity to go through most of the modules, and 4th grade we feel is pretty, user-friendly. It's really nothing too above their, even though it can be used at the 6th grade level, 4th it's very age-appropriate for that they can access it. The other nice piece is there's lots of different modules, so teachers can kind of pick and choose. They don't necessarily have to do every single one, but if they did, it's a total of about 2.5 to 3 hours. So we envision throughout the whole year. So it would be, a quick little, and they're like maybe 15, 20 minutes. So here's a little module. They do that piece, and it really hooks them in, which is nice because it's not just talking about money in this abstract way. It gives them some really good experiences. One of the story-based lines is along the line of your sibling, you borrowed their cell phone and you broke it. And now they need to get a new cell phone, and you need to help come up with that funding. And it walks them through all the decisions they might make. Do you want to go to the mall with your friend to buy something, or should you put that money in the bank and save up and help your sibling buy the new phone? So it's very, things they can relate to, things that they should, the decision making, and you can. We actually made the bad decisions, and it gets to that end and says, try again, because now that's not the right decision. So, just their approach is very friendly for the students. And involves some good problem-solving skills as well. On the teacher side, it has pre- and post-assessments, so you can really see what are they starting at and where are they going. And it's a very user-friendly for the teachers. The kids are on in seconds. They're very, they can just go through it on their own, and you can monitor exactly what module they're on and really see their pacing of time. So this slide, you can just see these are the 6 modules for the Vault component. Again, ties in, so the money piece ties in greatly to addition and subtraction of decimals and some of the great math skills that they need to develop and practice. And then, again, the social studies context of needs and wants, and then the financial piece is really fantastic that it gets at those things that they can understand or start to grasp at an early age. Again, my oldest is 5 and excited to start kindergarten across the street at Kittredge next year, and she and her sibling were playing with a whole bucket of money the other day, and we were out at the store, Mommy, can I go ride the carousel out in front of the grocery store? And nope, Mommy has no change, so next time, remember that big bucket of money, bring your own. So I think it's never too early to start and get them aware and thinking of it. And this might be a good opportunity to take a very, I think, high-quality online resource with a lot of support and then mirror it and have some opportunity for teachers to figure out what's the best way to embed this into the math and the social studies curriculum.
And EverFi has been in a number of districts around Massachusetts. They were in Andover this year. They're actually coming out to Sargent on Tuesday to do some training for our staff. And
Thompson as well.
At Thompson. So as we really looked into what would make sense for the curriculum side of this piece, EverFi seemed to make the most sense, especially because it was very engaging technology. 6 units a year seems like a very reasonable, we have a lot of work to do within our schools, but this would be a very positive experience for kids. We would build 4th and 5th and 6th. I just want to frame this a little bit in terms of this is the curriculum side. So when I think about financial literacy, I actually think about 3 groups of people. One is the kids, and this is very much the impact on our curriculum on the kids. One next is the parents, and so actually Mr. McDevitt set me up with a meeting with Lowell 5 Bank on Tuesday, and we're going to talk about whether a bank could provide some training for parents around savings and all of that. And then the third is actually notoriously, teachers are horrendous at financial literacy. Educators are not good at understanding savings. And so the other part is actually really educating the teachers. And so one of the things that we are reaching out to is to partner with the union around actually educating our teachers. And so that it's really kind of a fit community, not just the kids, because if we're really serious about changing spending and saving habits, it's not just the students. So can we kind of come together as a community to educate the triangle, which is the kids, the teachers, and and the parents. One of the components that is very much hoped for out of this program is actually to incentivize some savings. And so just imagine if this was possible, and this is a bit of a pipe dream, but I'm one who likes to dream. Imagine if every kindergartner in the North Andover Public Schools arrived at registration, and not only did they get registered for the North Andover Public Schools, but they got a 529 fund. And for every $50 the kid put in, and for every $50 the parents put in, there was an outside funder who put in $50, so that we started to really incentivize savings within the schools. It becomes a very attractive thing. I understand that that's not going to happen right away, but the idea really is to create a school system and a town that encourages savings. As college becomes increasingly more difficult to attain in terms of the finances, I think we owe it to our kids to really think about how they can access education beyond the North Andover Public Schools, whether that be college, whether that be additional training. And I also would say, and I don't want to get myself into too much trouble, but we owe it to our teachers to not put all their eggs in the state-funded retirement system, and that they need to think critically about saving in their own IRA or 403B, because at some point that gig is not going to continue. So, and I don't mean to scare anyone, but I think it's important that we think about that component. So it really is about kind of a bigger piece. I think the piece that's most relevant to the schools is what it's going to look like for our kids, and what it's going to look like for our kids in 4th grade next year is 6 lessons using EverFi, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So can I ask what is required out of the FIT money grant?
The only thing that we're going to get funding for from the FIT money grant is going to be to have teachers this summer go through the lessons and see if they need any adaptations. These lessons. Yep. And that we are going to use small amounts of money to support that. But really, because we were able to find a free resource, it's not much.
Okay. And is there any deliverable from the group back to the consortium, or is it that we use it, we approve it?
We use it.
Yeah, well, I do like the vision that you're describing, where it's not just about the academics aspect, and found money is fun money, and it definitely gives us an opportunity to get something. And we've already talked about how we'll be aligned with the requirements and the state required academic or curriculum components. This sounds like it's just falling from the sky is a great thing. Is there any concern that we've heard or that you have with regards to pursuing this?
I mean, I would be concerned if this was going to kind of overtake our work in our 4th grade, but really we've been able to find a solution that makes a ton of sense, 2.5 to 3 hours a year, and I think it's the right thing to do for our kids.
And I think it's automated, so it's not like...
Right. Yep, they can go at their own paces. I think, too, it sometimes teaching can get... What's the right words? Maybe dry, especially math sometimes, that monotonous, do these practice problems, and I think this really puts a real life spin on it, and it's an easy piece to apply it and really help the teachers see where are those pieces and more of the project-based learning and that real embedded, authentic learning.
And I appreciate that Kara has spent a lot of time looking at this and making sure that this feels like a good, no pun intended, fit, because that's really important. We're not going to go do something just because it's falling from the sky if it doesn't make sense for the North Andover Public Schools. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we felt that it's been a pretty good fit.
Yeah, I think it's been, and I think some possibilities again to branch out. They have the high school version, so our high school business teachers are looking into using that a little bit, and I just found out that they're launching a middle school one, I think this summer. So again, it has some opportunity to really create a larger
so I'm thinking about Matt, our Matt, right, and getting his education on student loans and what that means and interest and all of that, send them out into the cold, cruel world so that they have some...
Well, I mean, if you think about the American model of education, it's actually unique in the world in many respects that, up until 12th grade, it's free and public for anyone, and then it's not. And, that is a real jump between 12th and 13th grade. The game changes immensely. And we have an obligation to get our kids ready for, it's not like going from 8th to 9th. Going from 12th to 13th grade or to trade or to any type of, it's a significant change. And, Obama administration's talking about this. Everyone's talking about this. Representative DeZoglio has a bill in front of the Massachusetts House on this. I mean, it is a significant issue for our country that the game changes so significantly to the tune of $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in 1 year.
And especially for the students who take loans and do not graduate.
90, 100, I'm sorry. Everyone paying for it's going like this.
Especially for the students, the national average, I don't know what it is, Dr. Price, off the top of my head, but it's like a 55% completion rate of college. There's some kids that don't get the 4-year degree, so they're not getting the best ticket to the game of life to earn money. And, they're coming out with $60,000, $70,000 in debt.
Having had kids go through college, who didn't know how to write a check, couldn't open it, didn't know how to open a bank, there's some very fundamental training that we could give them that would get them started off a little bit better.
One of the things that I do also want to ask for reflection on is we have a lot of great piloting opportunities that are ongoing in the district, and sometimes we go in and explore, and sometimes we go in with a priori expectations and metrics. And this is, I think, a good opportunity to see, if we're going to disseminate this district-wide, how does it do? What are the criteria for success? What are the criteria for let's cycle back and maybe tweak and tune a little bit before we disseminate further?
And that's one of the reasons we liked EverFire is that they do have the pre and post assessment data, and that was something we were looking for because we want to make sure that this is having the impact that we desire in terms of student learning. So that was one of the reasons we thought this was a good solution.
Great. Any other comments?
Just like to say, I think this is great. I really like the program, and a couple of things just caught my eye really quickly. And obviously, you said you have young children as well, but in Model 3, one of the bullets that's there is need versus want.
That's great. It talks about genes and, these,
regarding that. But, there's a lot of really interesting things that are here, and I think that that's great. One thing that I didn't actually anticipate that I'm a little encouraged even more by was the impact and the introduction with the social studies as well, because I think that that's a really interesting piece to kind of put in, and I'm not looking to kind of really drive it, but I can really see when you start to get to the middle school and the world cultures and the impact and how it can really tie in. So I was intrigued by this, a year plus ago, but seeing this program, I really just think it's a very nice fit, and so thank you for finding it and digging in, and it looks great. Thank you.
Great.
So now what we would like to do is just come back, and I just, for transparency's sake, I did spend some time with our new school committee member on this, so I know that we're going back. But we did, if you remember, we articulated a 5-year curriculum plan. Determining curriculum is always a dicey reality between where is superintendent's prerogative and what is school committee prerogative. And the thing that I would just really like to do is ask all of you if this makes sense and to kind of get a formal endorsement from the school committee about the 5-year. Understanding that we will be, in terms of year 5, we will be presenting on a yearly basis, as we did with the Lucy Calkins writing for next year and the specifics that we were able to present for next year. But for us, I think it's really important as we move forward to kind of have something that we show parents, that we show teachers, that we show principals, and just wanted your endorsement of that. Mr. Gilligan, anything to add?
I would just say that I think this is a really good first step, especially in the 2 of the areas that Dr. Price identified in her entry plan, with a mechanism for funding for consistent and rigorous curriculum, meeting the needs of all students, particularly special education, ELL students, and students who excel academically. And one of the benefits of not having a ton of money up front is when you do different things with teachers, it's something that they can do really well, focus on, and it's staggered very nicely. So we're pretty excited about it, and it's really exciting to have a mechanism with the Medicaid fund eventually to have money coming in to support curriculum, material supplies, curriculum documentation, all the work that they do at the middle school and the high school and the professional development that's needed at the elementary to support this work. So.
Okay. So I think our policy is part of the packet in terms of what the responsibility is for the superintendent and the role of the school committee in this. I think this is clearly a very well thought out report, and I'm wondering at this point, do we need to voice a vote of acceptance, or this, at this point, if there's any questions or any concerns, to have them brought forward at this time? Which would you prefer, or which does the committee prefer?
I actually think our recommendation is that we're asking you to vote to support the recommended plan.
Which is the 5-year timeline as
Yeah.
presented with reporting annually.
Correct.
So
I would move that. I would move that, yes.
Okay, there's a motion to approve the timeline as presented with annual reporting.
Second.
Okay, so now discussion.
You know, it's interesting because, you know, when you read the policy, it's a little vague on what our responsibility is when it comes to curriculum. And this is really more the plan for curriculum, not the curriculum itself.
Correct.
So it's but I appreciate what your interest in getting our support. And I can't tell you how impressed I am to actually have a plan. I mean, and have a timeline. So this is, all by itself is wonderful. You know, as we go through it year by year, I think it'll be helpful for you to continue to sort of peel the onion on this for us, because, you know, the level's not clear, you know, high school, you know, all of that. So there's a lot of questions we could be asking, but just the fact that we have a plan and it's time-phased is wonderful. So I think this also fits well into your thought on adding more resources to what we do in our public schools. So this is the way to do that, right? This is the way to focus that effort. So I appreciate all that.
Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the timeline, and I guess we're also going to be accepting the presentation from the 25th as the plan. Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? You have your voice of approval.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. Moving on. Good luck. We have a second reading for resolution for full funding of the foundation budget. And I believe this and the collateral is in the packet. And again, for those who've been reading along, there is actually at the beginning of this year, you presented us with a different way of looking at the foundation budget that the commissioner is recommending.
Correct.
For this town over the implementation phase. It could be substantial increase in funding for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's proposed to be in excess of $4 million additional for the North Andover Public Schools specifically. So, and this is a letter that is being sent that we are being asked to sign on to, that you are being asked to sign on to. I do want to let folks out there know that this is actually being, part of this is actually being debated in the Senate, the Massachusetts Senate as we speak. I've been in contact with both of our senators, Bruce Tarr and Senator Ives. This is part of something called the RISE Act, but there's currently this debate going on around full funding of this over a 7-year plan, which probably makes sense. Even those who wrote it understood that this wasn't going to happen immediately just because of the cost. But we have voiced our support of the RISE Act for that specific purpose. Andrew Mailer also sent a letter supporting it to our senators. So, and I believe you reached out, Mr. McDevitt. So, I just think that this is a multi-pronged approach to let folks know that this is important to the North Andover Public Schools.
Great. So with that, I take a motion to accept the recommendation for full funding of the foundation budget as presented, so that we as the committee will sign such a letter and send in to, where's this going to go?
It's the suburban, we would just be signers on the suburban coalition, yeah.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion?
So I guess I'm a little confused. I thought what the Senate was debating today was the charter school bill, which had funding attached to it, but I thought that was separate from
No, so part of it is the full funding of the Foundation Budget Review Commission within 7 years. And so there's many parts of it. According to Senator Ives, who just emailed me right before this meeting, there's lots of amendments going on this. And we specifically talked about the fact that the funding for the foundation budget would be the key issue for us. But it is attached to that bill currently.
So I know the bill just passed 22-13. And I know Senator Ives voted for it and Bruce Tarr voted against it. But as I mentioned, there's no harm signing this letter. I'm going to vote in favor of that. I still think it'd be more beneficial, as being in their shoes before, you get a lot of these kind of generic letters that are signed by a bunch of different people, to have them all in front of us at the same time. And I know you were working, I think, with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, try to have a group meeting. I think would be a lot more effective than signing a letter. But again, there's no harm signing this letter.
Great. I'm in full support of that as well, Mr. Tracy.
Thanks for that update, Kenny.
Indeed.
Technology is great, isn't it?
There was an update also in the legislative bulletin from MASC. So I agree. I think that's something we should schedule.
And I think, in fairness, I shouldn't have, I mean, I just said how people voted, but the bill tonight was a very comprehensive bill. It had one piece, as you mentioned, but there was a lot of controversial stuff around charter schools in there. So there are people who obviously support, and I know Senator Tarr is a big supporter of as much local aid as possible. There are probably a lot of other parts of that bill that, and he should have that opportunity to explain why he voted that certain way. So
Is this something, what's your sense of the timing? I mean, before town meeting? I mean, as soon as possible?
The timing of it passing, becoming law?
No, to get our legislators in to talk.
A long time. I mean, listen, it's a big number. It's $1.4 million. It's $1.4 billion. I apologize. $1.4 billion. It's a tough number, and there's no way this would be taken up prior to town meeting. I mean, the House is knee deep in the budget.
No, but the question of when do you think would be the right time to try
for them to come? I would say for their.
Because
getting the legislators together is a little more difficult. I would say, way after town meeting, maybe in June or sometime.
Okay.
The summertime.
You know? But I think it's important not to raise expectations here. I mean, this is a big ask for them to have that kind of number. So
it's somewhat colorful when they do come together. So.
Well, we have done that.
Yes, we haven't done that in 2 years.
More than two.
At least 2 years.
So I'll take the action to try to circle the other boards and see if we can at least get a request for an all-board meeting for that purpose.
Yep.
With the legislature. Thank you. Any further conversation? So I think we have a motion and a second. I'm all in favor of accepting the Suburban Coalition letter as presented. Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No abstentions? We shall do that. Moving on. I think we're on to new business now, and we've dealt with school choice. Alice, first reading of Crest Board of Directors. I think that is in our packet as well. Actually, our current Crest representative, would you like to walk us through this, Mr. Limpert?
how about run?
Yeah,
Run through,
yeah.
Here.
So it's basically that we need to appoint a member to the Board of Directors. I will say that Crest often talks about how appreciative they are that the North Andover School Committee has Stan Limpert as their representative, and they find him a wonderful member of their board, just saying.
So moved.
Just saying.
And the director this past weekend said Stan's on a subcommittee.
And that concludes my presentation.
There we go.
Okay, moving on. No, all kidding aside, I mean, do you want to make a comment about
Well, I have to tell you, I've actually been enjoying this, being a member of this group. I can't tell you what a great management team they now have at Crest. It's just the best group of people over there. And their executive director or superintendent, whatever her real title is, they're doing an excellent job. So I'm in full support of what they're doing. I've gotten involved in some strategic planning, some technology issues that they're dealing with. So it's been very interesting for me, and I would be happy to continue doing this industry.
Wonderful. So with that said, I don't think there's an urgency in
No, just the
making
first
vote.
reading.
So if there's no objection, we'll take that up at the next meeting.
My next speech.
You have one more meeting to decide not to.
Next speech will be even.
We can discuss it again.
We can discuss it one more time. Very good. So with that done, moving on to 10D, naming of central office conference room. This brings up a change to a naming policy request as well. But let's take the naming of the central office conference room topic first. And we have a request for the naming of the library and the administrative office. I guess, do you want to take this, or Dr. Price?
Ask Mr. Limpert.
Mr. Limpert, do you want to take us through this?
Based on some prior discussions about this, I thought it would be appropriate for me to offer a recommendation, a proposal for naming one of our conference rooms here in the administration building after our past superintendent, Dr. Hutchinson. You've read the material I presented here, and I think it's very impressive when I went back and actually wrote this down. to think of the contributions that he made to our school district in 8 years, but more specifically in his 3 years as superintendent. There was a lot of good things that happened, and I think he set the stage for a lot of good work that's going on now, as Dr. Price has mentioned, setting a whole climate of collaboration. He, was really the strongest proponent of the building respectful communities and RAISE and all of that. So I think there's many good reasons to honor him, but, most importantly, he was all about teaching and learning curriculum and students, and so I think this is only appropriate that, we, in a small way, just recognize that by putting a plaque on a wall for a conference room.
In addition, I think the content of the room is a lot of his donations of curriculum resources.
He donated a huge amount of his personal library upon his departure, which is available.
Retirement.
His retirement from the North Andover Public Schools, which are available for any staff member or parent to come in. And if you go down to that space, you can see a full library there.
Okay. Again, this is first reading. The first reading actually triggers the process, and the process is what I think we have to focus on a little bit. There are two. So unless there's anything else on the first reading of this request, what I'd like to do is move on to the process issues, because I think there's this request which doesn't completely conform to the existing process, but also we have the
naming policy.
The naming policy for we need an exemption essentially for our Hall of Fame educator.
Let me just say first that I took a very rough cut at starting this process of revising this policy. It needs more work. So I would encourage you all to just use this as a starting point to think about this. How do we want to deal with exceptions, some of the ones that you raised, Mr. Tracy. So I'm not saying that this is the complete answer yet, so just we need to think about this, and let's just all figure out what it'll look like.
Okay. So what I would propose we do is take a look at the proposed edits to the naming of school facilities. I, for one, think that we also need to add a specific exemption for the Hall of Fame educator process. But what you've done here, I think, adds the flexibility and addresses the challenge that we have in order to address the second, the aforementioned conference room naming. So is there any conversation that you want to have at this first reading on these two? Or do you want to think about the policy change? Have that next meeting as the first topic to decide, and then we can move on with the proposal for the naming second. Does that sound reasonable? I don't want to short-circuit the process, but I know this might be the first time, with the exception of Monday, that people have had a chance to digest this.
Well, I think we're taking two things at the same time. As far as naming the room after Hutch, we're saying that triggers the existing policy as it is right now.
Unfortunately, it doesn't, because the existing policy doesn't necessarily permit such a naming.
Really?
And that's the issue. Well, that's from where I say, I think that's the issue.
I thought it did.
Well, that's why we need to look at the policy, and we need to decide.
I think the challenge with that is, sorry, I mean, I spent a little bit of time with this. In policy FFR, the piece that I think is the conflicting piece is a recommendation in memory of an individual or event. It's not necessarily in memory, but in memory or honor. Will not be considered for a period of at least 5 years after the passing or the event, except under special circumstances and approved by the school committee. I think with that, when we tried to look at, and there's no secret here, naming the track after Alex Farisi, was the impact of that. And I think when he initially passed, there was certainly a feeling in the community that we should do that. And I think when we looked back, I think it's now 7 years, it could be 8, that it was still as impactful, and it is still as defining, I think, for this community, and that's where we kind of put that in there. Not to say that, Dr. Hutchinson's legacy isn't going to continue for a number of years, but that doesn't necessarily do that. I think in that case, I would look to see us maybe suspend the rules or suspend the policy to do that. I think if we're actually saying except under special circumstances, we're then opening the door to, well, let's just suspend it. You know, like now it's a special circumstance. Everything's a special circumstance. So I think we probably just want to spend some time rewriting or refining
my
this a
suggestion
little bit.
would be if you could give some thought to not leaving, sort of closing that loophole by giving one or two specific options, you know, like the Educator Hall of Fame option, right? And that would be, you know, giving one or two specific exemptions to the 5-year rule,
right?
But not have it be too open-ended. So I agree with what you're saying, right? You don't, once you make a big loophole, then everything can be, suspend the rules, and whatever we want to do, we just do it. So, you know, if we're thinking about the perpetuity, right, school committees in the future, right, you know, maybe give some thought to what that might look like, you know, for these two examples, right? Educator Hall of Fame. So every year we want to continue that process, and we think that's a good idea.
Yep.
So we name a room after a teacher or
an educator.
Yep. And for people who have served the district who don't necessarily fall exactly in that category, which would be a charter superintendent or someone else, right? So if we wrote those up specifically and said, okay, the policy now includes these two exceptions, that might be a way to do it.
I can take a stab at that, and then should I just circle that with Bev and see if she can redistribute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
This was just a beginning.
And honestly, the other approach to think about is just the opposite, which is we wanted to make sure that the emotion of an event didn't create that, that, I don't want to say premature reaction for good reason or for bad. And if that is a guideline as opposed to an absolute, then it's a guideline.
But to that point, the Educator Hall of Fame already has like the 5-year rule built into it.
Yes.
So it's not like somebody who just retired yesterday, right?
Right.
That we're going to do this. So that already has it built in. So the fact that we're putting a plaque on the wall every year, they've already gone through their waiting period, if you will, and they've been proven to be a significant.
But I agree with you, Ms. Lipper. This process, the naming process, should be not the process as followed for Hall of Fame. There's a separate vetting and approvals process for this. So I agree with you. That should be explicitly exempted in this.
Okay. And I apologize for being the lawyer, but I would suggest that the policy as it's written right now, a period of at least 5 years after the passing event would be the Hall of Fame educator being elected to the Hall of Fame, not that person's retirement. So I do think that would have to be cleaned up either way, and maybe just
absolutely,
Let me take a stab at it, and then I'll try to get this out. Today's Thursday, maybe by Monday or so, and then I think we've got 2 or 3 weeks before the next meeting. Three because of
you're busy. You're busy keeping our neighborhood safe right now. So.
I'm trying. I get the zoning board. All right.
And then there's that. You're tracking cars in your neighborhood now.
I'm not tracking cars.
Okay, so thank you for taking on, and I think that's sufficient for first reading then. So you'll forward to Bev?
I will, and I'll ask Bev.
If you need help or insights, feel free to reach out. With that, the last thing on our new business is the school committee's summer retreat dates. We'd like to try to get the dates identified, and then also I'd like to ask for input into the agenda for that activity. It served us quite well to get input from the committee on what it is that we want to focus on this summer, and I know the superintendent clearly has some ideas.
So is that something we can get back to you on by next?
So I think we just need a little bit of guidance. So there's 2 competing issues. One is for in June to reconstitute the board. It's one of the things you guys have to do, vice chair, that kind of thing. I think in the past you may have done the summer retreat at the same time, but that has to be done by a certain time in June. That has to be there's a deadline for that. By reconstituting the board.
We reorganize.
Yes.
We elect officers.
But it has to be done, I think there's
it's in our last meeting.
Yes, second to last meeting. But sometimes that's been conflated with the summer retreat. And so, I'm just trying to...
Yeah, typically that hasn't been the case.
Okay.
Typically it's been in like July or some other time.
So,
August.
I mean, my desire is... not to kind of forecast my thinking too much, but I think that our work over the next few months is really to kind of do an equivalent of the 5-year curriculum map for kind of all of the North Andover public schools, and really to try to create a vision for how we plan to move forward as a school system in a multi-year, multi-pronged approach. That's something I want to spend a lot of time with my 2 and hopefully 3 assistant superintendents this summer, present that. We are doing our leadership retreat in the 18th, 19th, 17th, 18th, and 19th with the entire leadership team. Not you, my of August. So, it really, I think it's critical that the school committee weighs in during the formation of that plan. So preferably for me, it would be sometime in August, so I have some time to really get some meat on the bones of that plan. I mean, clearly the plan is stemming from my entry report and the areas that I identified as opportunities.
And would you want our input before or after?
So I think that's up for discussion. I mean, I think mostly, if we were able, I would probably like to do it after. The leadership team has really vetted it and put some meat on the bones of that, which we will do on the 17th, 18th, and 19th of August. So if we were able to do it towards the end of August, I think it potentially would be a much more fruitful conversation. If we're going to do it in June, it would be in the very preliminary stages of that vision. So, so that's where I stand in terms of thinking about the long term here for the North Andover Public Schools, is the commensurate kind of multi-year plan around the vision of where we are going to head as a district around some key priority areas, which we talked about when I outlined kind of my goals.
And I might also suggest that, I know this is not a popular idea, but they have two events. One would be more of a school committee oriented retreat. We could have some other time in July or whenever to talk about school committee kinds of things if we feel that would be appropriate. And then have another event that would be specifically to work with you and your staff about whatever you've come up with for the big picture. So that's another option. So what it's worth. So, and that could be, once we choose new leadership, that could be something that we could decide at that point. So.
I just think it's important that we get some dates on the books as those of us are trying to plan our summer vacations.
So that said, if that leaves us basically a week after your leadership meetings.
Yeah, so it's the week of the 22nd of August, or the new teachers report back on the 29th, so it would be better for me the week of the 22nd, but I also respect that you all may be away that week, so I want to be respectful of where you are.
And that's part of the reason why we wanted to get this out to the committee early.
Right.
Both the conversation that you just suggested as well as the scheduling aspect. So again, the recommendation is please scrub your calendars, and if you could provide feedback through Bev of your preference.
Okay.
Right, is it a split meeting so we can focus on school committee ways of working, objectives, priorities, et cetera, at a school committee retreat, or one meeting, ideally the week of the 22nd, to accommodate the rest of the administrative schedules? And if so, is there a preferred date that week? So,
what have you done in the past?
In the past, we've had a single meeting, and it was usually earlier in August, in July.
Typically, and it's been mostly school committee focused, but we haven't had the opportunity to see appointments. So.
This past year was in August, though. First week in August, wasn't it?
First week in August.
It was, yes. Yes. Okay. So please provide that feedback through Bev as well, and we can review that out at the next meeting.
Okay.
That's the end of our new business. I'm going to open up the conversation to public comments again. If there's anyone who's suffered through the meeting and has public comments from the school committee, please step forward and identify yourself. Great. Okay, seeing none. Committee comments?
I have three things that I just wanted to bring up. One, I know that we've had a little bit of conversation about this, but I want to just be mindful. We've got really one more meeting in April. I think we have two in May, and then one before in June at the end of the year. There may be two there, but we want to start to look at the evaluation of Dr. Price, and making sure that we have time to kind of do that. So I'm not sure when we have that on the calendar, but I think we want to talk about how we're going to do that process, and if we need to, have any artifacts or documentation, with Dr. Price to make sure that she has the available time to do that.
Can I just, I looked at this recently. One of the things we had committed to was actually surveying stakeholders about whether they've interacted with me, whether they have bought into kind of the vision I'm starting to build. Bev today, because she's Bev, started to draft that survey, so I'd be more than happy to bring a draft of it.
Of course you do.
Yes, because she's amazing. Yeah, she even wrote the letter to thank everyone for doing it, so, from me. So anyways, I would be happy to bring that next time,
Okay.
just because that was one of the things we had committed to do. It's a very targeted survey around communication and vision, but I can bring that next time just to start.
Okay.
Because I think if we would want to get that out in the May newsletter, so we would want to approve that at the next school committee meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we have superintendent evaluation on the school committee calendar already for, help me, is it the last week in May or the first meeting in June?
I don't know, but I can let you know.
Okay, because I thought that was already on the...
Okay. I don't remember that being there. I'm sure it is, but, I want to make sure Dr.
But
Price
at the
is...
same time, we have some homework to do before we get there.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
some forms to fill out, some artifacts to review, and blah, blah.
And those artifacts, thanks to Google Docs, have been accruing from day one.
Yeah, many of them were brought forward in the mid-cycle review that I presented to you. They're still there.
Yeah.
We'll update those.
And in terms of the review process, we have to double check on the new superintendent onboarding process. I think the objectives that we set up front, we have a review form that we fill out. You're right. Put comments and our perception of exceeds, completes, and what have you.
Yep.
And then we also have the opportunity to review her on the specific objectives that were set up. So.
The other question is whether or not you want Dr. Baer to come. That was something that Stan had brought up. I'm actually meeting with her next week. If there's a date you would like her to come, I can see if she's available.
I think that would be good.
Yeah, I would recommend that when we're reviewing the artifacts, if she could be there to certainly provide her input, and so I think a few of the artifacts were dependent on her as well. She might be able to provide a readout.
And, to give some, just sort of overview of the program, the induction program, that might be good.
And she can tell you where I have some areas of growth.
Good. Opportunities.
Probably in alphabetical order.
Yeah.
That many? Oh, my goodness.
In detail, probably.
Great.
Perfect. Two other things that I just want to point out, and they're more community-oriented, but Saturday night is the North Andover Youth Center fundraiser, the Night to Shine, which if you haven't had kids who have started going to the youth center, it is a ridiculous asset that this town has, and it is absolutely just fantastic. And the thing that I think was really impressive to me that I didn't realize was that this event is only, I think this is its 8th year, but they give 4 $2,500 scholarships to North Andover students as they graduate, and have obviously been involved in the programs and the summer fund and all of the work that they do. And I don't know how many other towns have a resource like this, and the facility is just fantastic. And then, of course, on Wednesday at the North Andover Country Club, we have the Pristash Award Ceremony. So, again, they have changed the format for that from years in the past. It is a donation. There is no ticket charge to kind of come in. I believe it is a cash bar and then past hors d'oeuvres, and there will be some speakers honoring the recipients for this year, and really all volunteers in all of our schools. And I think everybody who's ever been in our school knows the number of volunteers that it takes in order to go from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and way after that as well. So,
do we do citations for that or anything? Do we do any kind of presentation at that?
We do not.
I believe am I incorrect? I know it's on my calendar. I think I actually am there and say something.
Yeah. The superintendent usually speaks.
The committee does not.
And
did you write her speech yet?
No, Bev's got that.
And it's already printed on my desk.
I got to say that actually it's nice, because I think that the coordination between the school committee and this event, some years it's happened where we've had school committee that night.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yeah, it's been a challenge.
So I know I'm present, and I believe I do
So we're not having
recognize.
school committee meeting that night.
Correct.
Yeah, right. That's a good thing.
Okay. Sorry, thank you. That was it.
Tracy?
But we do have kindergarten registration at the Kittredge School that night, so I will be late getting there.
We'll save you.
No, beyond that, I just want to say congratulations to our newest school committee member as well. We're happy to have you here, and I personally am thrilled that you were successful last week.
Thank you. Excited to be here myself.
And we have one of those volunteers now as a member of our committee. So
That's right.
one of those
Yes.
Chris Dash class of volunteers, right? So that's great. I guess my one comment would be that when we're thinking about a retreat this summer or working with the administrative team, one of the issues I think we're going to be thinking about next year is facilities, right? If when the budget passes, which we assume it will, in the CIP will be money to start planning for classrooms or something, right? And I think that's time for us to start thinking about that from a school committee point of view, in addition to what the administration will be thinking about.
Already way started on that one.
I know you are.
Yeah.
I know you are, but we're not. And
Yeah.
I want us to be part of that
I
process.
agree. We need to do that.
Okay, so because I don't think that's merely an administration problem. I think that's a school committee issue. I think that's a community issue. I think there's a lot of impact that could come from depending on the decisions we might make there. So I think we all need to be part of that process.
Yeah, and I would say that part of the vision is going to be a facilities conversation, so that ties incredibly into what I'm thinking about in August. We can't talk about things like lowering class size without thinking about facility implications.
Absolutely. But I'd like for us, the school committee, as the elected representatives, to be an integral part of that. So we're
absolutely
sort of weighing in for the community, and then at some point we'll get the community on board too, and let them tell us what they think.
What I think you're referring to is the options are being cultivated.
Yes, no, I get that. I get that. But I don't want to get too far down the road on the options and be sort of.
So just to be really clear, Mr. Limbert, the money that is in the town meeting is really to kind of present and to be able to develop those options. So we can have all of those options, and we've been talking about them. But until we have architects and planners and all of that look at that. So the idea will really be to probably in the fall have some options presented to us by people who can really present options.
No, I understand. I get that.
But that being said, part of the vision is absolutely making sure that we have the facilities to do what we're hoping to do within the schools.
And I guess my response to that would be, I'd like to give those architects and planners and whoever all those people are going to be that we're going to hire some direction before they start and say, here's the kind of options we'd like for you to look at for us. I mean, just not a completely blank piece of paper. I'd like to give them some starting points for what we think would be good for our community, both our school community and our larger community. So that's all I'm thinking. So, and we can do that.
Fair. Good. Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Ms. Mabley?
I'm all set, thank you.
I like her already.
My first day, I don't
Yeah.
glorify the first day I'm here.
So shoot you up.
Last comment,
right.
last comment, our next school committee meeting is April 28th. That'll be here. And at this point, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.